Have you ever felt like love keeps passing your door while everyone else seems to be stepping into there forever, and deep down you're starting to wonder if maybe you were forgotten, maybe your person chose someone else, maybe your story just isn't meant to happen the way you dreamed? But what if I told you that nothing about your love story is cancelled, nothing about your future is erased, and the only reason it hasn't happened yet is because it's being protected, prepared, and perfectly positioned? And if you leave this message too soon, you might miss the very truth that will completely change how you see your waiting season, because your soulmate is not denied, they are delayed, and by the end of this message you will understand exactly why this delay is the greatest sign that your love is still on the way. There are moments in your life when you start to wonder if love has forgotten your address. When you scroll through pictures of engagements and anniversaries and baby announcements and you quietly ask yourself why everyone else seems to be moving forward while you feel stuck in the waiting room of your own destiny. And in those silent moments the enemy of your peace begins to whisper that maybe you were overlooked, maybe you missed your chance. Maybe your soulmate found someone else, maybe what you long for so deeply simply is not written for you. But what if the truth is far more powerful and far more comforting than your fear? What if your soulmate is not denied but delayed? What if the pause you are experiencing is not a rejection but a preparation, not a closed door but a divine recalculation? Not abandonment but alignment taking place behind the scenes in ways you cannot yet see. Because delay does not mean destruction and waiting does not mean worthless and time passing does not mean promise cancelled. It often means that something so significant is being arranged that it cannot be rushed without damaging the very thing you have been praying for. And the reason this truth is hard to accept is because we live in a world addicted to instant results where everything is delivered overnight and love is treated like a transaction instead of a transformation. But real love, soulmate love, the kind that withstands storms and silences and seasons, is not manufactured on demand. It is cultivated through growth, refinement, healing, and timing that stretches beyond your current understanding, and you may not realize it yet, but the very delays that frustrate you are shaping you into someone capable of sustaining the love you desire rather than sabotaging it the moment it arrives. Because if your soulmate had met you 5 years ago, maybe you would have pushed them away out of insecurity, or chosen them for the wrong reasons, or depended on them to fix wounds they were never meant to heal. And if they had met you before their own lessons were learned, perhaps they would have hurt you unintentionally, perhaps they would not have recognized your value, perhaps they would have walked away not because you were wrong but because they were not ready. And so what feels like stagnation is often protection, what feels like silence is often strategy. What feels like loneliness is often construction taking place beneath the surface of your life, because alignment requires both souls to arrive at the same level of awareness, maturity, and readiness, and that synchronization cannot be forced without fracturing the foundation. And the painful truth is that many people meet their soulmate too early and destroy something that could have been extraordinary simply because timing was ignored, because they confused attraction with destiny and urgency with purpose. And they tried to force a forever into a season that was only meant for growth. But you are being spared that heartbreak by a delay that feels cruel but is actually kind. Because divine timing is rarely convenient but always precise, and if you look back at your own history you will begin to see that many things you once begged for did not happen when you wanted them to, and at the time you felt disappointed, maybe even betrayed by life. But later you realized that had those doors opened sooner you would not have been prepared to walk through them successfully, and love is no different. In fact, love is The one area where timing matters most, because when two souls meet before they are ready they can damage each other in ways that take years to undo, and so your waiting is not wasted, your solitude is not punishment, your single season is not proof of unworthiness, it is the sacred space where your character is being refined, where your standards are being strengthened, where your dependence on validation is being replaced with self-assurance, where your heart is being cleansed of desperation. So that when love finally arrives you will not cling to it out of fear but embrace it out of confidence, and this is the part no one talks about, that soulmate love is not simply about finding the right person, it is about becoming the right person, and becoming requires time. And time often feels like loss when you are measuring yourself against other people's timelines. But comparison is the thief of contentment and the enemy of destiny, because your path was never meant to mirror someone else's journey, and the reason your story feels slower is not because it is lesser but because it is layered, because some foundations must be dug deeper before the structure can rise higher. And perhaps your soulmate is also in a season of breaking and rebuilding. Perhaps they are learning hard lessons about boundaries and self-worth and faithfulness and patience. Perhaps they are healing from a relationship that taught them what they will never again tolerate. Perhaps they are building the career stability that will allow them to provide security. Perhaps they are confronting parts of themselves that would have sabotaged your connection had you met too soon, and while you sit in frustration wondering why nothing is happening, something is happening in both of you. Growth is happening, clarity is happening, maturity is happening, alignment is happening. And the beauty of divine delay is that it spares you from premature unions that feel magical at first but collapse under pressure. Because the roots were shallow, and you might not understand why certain relationships did not work out, why people left, why connections faded, why conversations stopped, but sometimes removal is redirection, sometimes rejection is protection, sometimes the wrong person must exit so that the right person has space to enter, and if you had settled for the almost, you would have missed the aligned. If you had clung to the temporary, you would have blocked the eternal, and that is why the delay hurts, because it forces you to release what feels available in order to make room for what is appointed, and waiting is uncomfortable because it exposes your fears, it reveals your insecurities, it confronts your doubts, it makes you sit with yourself without distraction. And yet in that stillness you discover strength you did not know you possessed, you learn to enjoy your own company. You build a life that is fulfilling without romantic attachment, and paradoxically that is when you become most ready for love, because you are no longer seeking someone to complete you but someone to complement you, and there is a powerful difference between those two desires. One is rooted in lack and the other in abundance, and soulmate love flows from abundance. It is two whole individuals choosing each other, not two broken halves clinging out of fear of being alone. And so if your soulmate is delayed, it is because you are being elevated to a place where you can receive them without losing yourself, where you can love them without abandoning your identity, where you can build with them instead of leaning on them as a crutch. And this process takes time, and time can feel cruel when your heart is ready but circumstances are not. But readiness is more than desire, it is alignment of mind, heart, and season, and you may desire love intensely yet still need refinement in areas that only solitude can teach. And this is not a condemnation but a preparation, because when the right love enters your life it will require emotional stability, communication skills, patience, forgiveness, resilience, and self-awareness, and those qualities are not developed overnight, they are cultivated through experiences, disappointments, self-reflection, and growth, and if you rush the process you risk repeating cycles instead of breaking them, and perhaps the delay is breaking generational patterns. Perhaps it is teaching you to choose differently than you once did, perhaps it is teaching you to recognize red flags you once ignored, perhaps it is teaching you that chemistry without character is chaos, perhaps it is teaching you that loneliness is better than settling, and these lessons are priceless even if they are painful, because they ensure that when your soulmate arrives you will recognize them not by intensity alone but by peace, not by butterflies alone but by consistency, not by words alone but by actions. And peace takes time to appreciate if you have been addicted to drama. Consistency takes time to value if you have been accustomed to unpredictability, and healthy love can feel unfamiliar if you have known only turbulence, so the delay is recalibrating your expectations, it is detoxing you from toxic patterns, it is raising your standards, it is aligning your heart with what is sustainable rather than what is sensational. And while you wait you are building a life that your soulmate will step into rather than rescue, you are cultivating purpose, friendships, passions, stability, and self-respect, and when two lives like that merge, the result is powerful, because it is partnership not dependency, it is collaboration not compensation, and that kind of union cannot be manufactured through impatience, it must unfold through divine orchestration, and yes there will be nights when doubt creeps in and you question whether this message applies to you, whether perhaps you are the exception, whether maybe your delay truly is denial, but remind yourself that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because you cannot see the movement does not mean the movement is not happening, just because the seeds are underground does not mean they are not growing, and often the most significant transformations occur in hidden seasons, and if you were handed everything instantly you would never develop the depth required to steward it wisely, and so your waiting is not an empty space. It is a sacred incubation, it is the quiet before convergence. It is the space where two separate journeys are being shaped so that when they intersect the impact will be lasting, and imagine meeting your soulmate at the precise moment when both of you have learned from past mistakes, when both of you have healed enough to communicate instead of accuse, when both of you have grown enough to support rather than compete, when both of you have matured enough to commit rather than flee. That meeting will feel less like chaos and more like clarity, less like chasing and more like choosing, less like confusion and more like confirmation, and you will look back at this season of waiting not with resentment but with gratitude, because you will see that every delay prevented a disaster, every closed door redirected you toward compatibility, every lonely night strengthened your independence, every disappointment refined your discernment, and you will realize that nothing was wasted, not the tears, not the prayers, not the questions, not the silence, it was all part of the preparation, and perhaps the greatest shift you can make right now is to stop interpreting delay as denial and start interpreting it as development. Because development positions you for durability, and durability is what soulmate love requires, not fleeting passion but enduring partnership, not temporary excitement but lifelong alignment, and that alignment is being crafted even when you cannot trace it. So instead of asking why it is not happening yet, ask who you are becoming in the process. Instead of focusing on the absence of love, focus on the presence of growth. Instead of measuring your timeline against others, measure your progress against your past self, because the person you are today is likely stronger, wiser, more self-aware, more resilient than the person you were years ago, and that transformation did not happen accidentally, it happened through seasons that felt uncertain and slow and frustrating. And yet those very seasons produced the depth you now carry, and depth attracts depth, And when two deep souls meet at the right time, the connection is not rushed, it is recognized, it is not forced, it flows, and when it flows it lasts. And so take heart in knowing that your soulmate is not denied, they are delayed until both of you are ready to handle what you once only dreamed about, delayed until the version of you that meets them is capable of sustaining the blessing, delayed until the circumstances align in ways that minimize unnecessary obstacles, delayed until your standards match your value, delayed until their maturity matches your vision, delayed not to punish you but to protect you, not to frustrate you but to fortify you, not to deprive you but to develop you. And one day what feels like waiting will feel like wisdom, what feels like silence will feel like strategy, what feels like loneliness will feel like leadership over your own life. And you will step into love not as someone who feared being left behind but as someone who understands that true destiny is never denied, only delayed until the moment is right. Even now, as you continue walking through this season where nothing seems to be changing on the surface, it is important to understand that divine delay is rarely about punishment and almost always about positioning, because positioning determines sustainability. And sustainability determines whether love will simply start strong or remain strong, and many people experience intense beginnings that collapse under the weight of unresolved wounds, unhealed trauma, financial instability, emotional immaturity, or misplaced priorities, and what you call delay may actually be the quiet rearrangement of details that will allow your future relationship to breathe instead of suffocate, because when two lives merge there are more moving parts than feelings alone. There are habits, mindsets, communication styles, expectations, spiritual beliefs, family dynamics, ambitions, fears, insecurities, and past experiences that all converge into one shared reality. And if those elements are not refined individually before union, they collide instead of complement. And perhaps right now you are being refined in ways you do not immediately recognize. Perhaps your patience is stretching. Perhaps your standards are solidifying. Perhaps your attachment patterns are shifting from anxious to secure. Perhaps you are learning to enjoy your own rhythm instead of molding yourself to fit someone else's. Inconsistency, and those internal shifts are monumental even if they are invisible to everyone else, because soulmate love requires emotional security more than emotional intensity. And security is forged in solitude, in reflection, in choosing yourself repeatedly when no one is applauding. And there is something deeply transformative about becoming content in your own presence because it eliminates the desperation that often sabotages good connections, and desperation makes people ignore red flags, tolerate disrespect, overextend themselves, and rush intimacy without foundation. And when you are no longer desperate, you become discerning, you begin to evaluate character instead of chemistry alone, you begin to value consistency over charisma, you begin to seek peace over passion-fueled chaos. And that evolution is crucial because the kind of love that lasts is rarely loud in the beginning, it is steady, intentional, grounded. And if you had met your soulmate before this shift occurred, you might have overlooked them entirely because they did not trigger your old patterns, and that is another reason for delay. Sometimes you must unlearn attraction to dysfunction before you can recognize alignment with stability, because what feels familiar is not always what is healthy, and what is healthy may initially feel unfamiliar until you grow into it, and growth takes time. And time feels uncomfortable when your heart is eager, but eagerness alone is not qualification. Readiness is qualification, and readiness involves clarity about who you are, what you need, what you will not tolerate, and what you are willing to give, and perhaps you are also being taught to build a life that is fulfilling independent of romantic love, because when love becomes your sole source of joy it becomes too heavy to carry, but when you cultivate purpose, friendships, faith, creativity, discipline, and self-respect, love becomes an addition rather than an escape, and soulmate love thrives when two fulfilled individuals choose to merge their already meaningful lives, not when two empty people try to fill each other's voids, and consider the possibility that your soulmate is undergoing their own transformation right now. Perhaps they are ending something that no longer serves them, perhaps they are confronting fears of commitment, perhaps they are learning how to communicate vulnerably instead of defensively. Perhaps they are building the courage to relocate, to change careers, to step into the version of themselves that can match your growth, and while you sit wondering if they exist, they may be wondering the same about you, and both of you are being shaped simultaneously in separate spaces, and when the shaping is complete the meeting will not require chasing, forcing, or convincing, it will feel natural, mutual, clear, because alignment reduces confusion. And confusion often signals misalignment rather than destiny, and that is another lesson the delay is teaching you to stop romanticizing uncertainty, to stop labeling anxiety as chemistry, to stop interpreting mixed signals as mystery, because true alignment does not require you to decode someone's intentions constantly, it does not require you to beg for clarity, it does not leave you in a perpetual state of doubt, and perhaps your past experiences were training grounds showing you what soulmate love is not, showing you how it feels to overgive, to overthink, to overcompensate, and now you are learning balance, and balance is essential for longevity, because in a lasting relationship both individuals must feel safe, seen, and supported without losing their individuality, and individuality strengthens union rather than threatening it, and the delay gives you time to solidify your identity so that when you enter partnership you do so as a whole person rather than as someone searching for completion. And it is also possible that your current environment needed to change before your soulmate could enter your life, perhaps certain friendships needed to fade, perhaps certain habits needed to break, perhaps certain opportunities needed to arise that will place you in the right city, the right workplace, the right gathering at the right moment, because destiny often moves through ordinary circumstances orchestrated with extraordinary precision, and if even one detail is premature the entire chain reaction shifts. And what feels like nothing happening may actually be hundreds of small adjustments aligning quietly, and you may not see the full picture yet, but one day you will look back and notice how every delay rerouted you away from something misaligned and towards something intentional, and you will realize that the waiting season was not empty but strategic, not stagnant but formative, not forgotten but guided, and that realization will bring peace to the nights when you once questioned your worth. Because your worth was never the issue, timing was, and timing is complex, it involves two stories unfolding separately until the exact intersection point appears, and that intersection cannot be forced by fear or accelerated by comparison, it unfolds when growth on both sides reaches compatibility, and compatibility is deeper than shared interests, it is shared values, shared vision, shared emotional capacity, shared willingness to work through conflict instead of escape it. And those qualities are developed, not discovered instantly, and so as you continue forward remind yourself that you are not behind, you are being built, you are not overlooked, you are being positioned, you are not denied, you are being prepared, and preparation may feel lonely but it is purposeful, and when purpose and timing finally converge, you will understand that every delay carried intention, every pause carried protection, and every moment of doubt was shaping you into someone capable of receiving and sustaining the love that was always meant for you.